Oh.
In a nutshell. Okay, I'd love to share a lot because, you heard, I did spend 20 years living in France and I have a French passport. I was a student of French immersion. At the same time, very Zionistic and very involved in the Jewish community in Winnipeg. And I was going to be going to France to be a language assistant in a high school. I was planning to go for 1 year. And that was going to, 1 year. So that was going to be in the fall of 1986. And in the spring, I went on a Jewish Students' Convention in Montreal, and I met, at the time, the president of the Jewish Students Association, l'UJF, from France, a certain Eric Gebaly. And I kept his contact info, and when I came to Nice, because that's where I lived in the south of France, very different from the Parisian experience, I decided there was no Jewish students movement, this just wasn't acceptable. I went up to Paris and I met with Eric Gebaly, and I said, we want to start a chapter here in Nice. So he gave me all the information I needed, and we went to Nice, and I tried to connect with all these young Jewish kids. The first place I went was Chabad, because it just turns out that Rabbi Altein's sister is the wife of the Chabad rabbi of Nice. Go figure. So I met all sorts of young adults, and we used to hang out at this kosher restaurant because lunch was nearly free on Mondays. And we decided we're going to start this Jewish Students Association in Nice. And we got support from most of the Jewish community, and I became very involved there. And Eric Gebaly, who was the president of the UJF, also was one of the founding members at the time of an organization called SOS Racisme. And you may have heard of it. And this was in the mid-'80s. I think that organization started in '84. At the time, the state of anti-Semitism in France was much more from the extreme right, the Front National, Jean-Marie Le Pen. And the Jewish Students Association thought it was important to support their Arab cohorts by creating this organization where they would get together, they would partner up to support each other against the extreme right. So the anti-Semitism at the time was coming from the extreme right, from Jean-Marie Le Pen, not really so much from the Arab population because they were supporting each other. A lot of the dynamic, active Jewish community was from North Africa. They had a lot in common with the Arab counterparts. Things slowly began to change at the end of the 80s and into the early 90s when the first Intifada happened in Israel, 1987. And what happened is Arlem Desir, a Muslim Arab member of the organization SOS Racisme, took over. And slowly but surely, this organization started to identify with the Intifada, the War of Stones, la guerre des pierres, they called it in France, that was happening in Israel. And this identification started to be supported by a lot of pseudo-intellectuals from the Arab community. A certain Tariq Ramadan, who was a professor in Switzerland, he was constantly invited to speak in television, in all sorts of public forums in France, and eventually he was banned because he was inciting the public and young adults to take a stand not only against the Jews, because they identified the Jews to be the enemy, and they identified with the Palestinians, but also against the French in general. So what the Jews were experiencing, the French population in general was also experiencing. And in the 2000s, this came to a head with a series of riots in 2005, where over 8,000 cars were burned in one night. People would take to the streets, throw stones, burn cars, and they didn't even care whose cars they were burning. They were burning their neighbors' cars, and it could have been fellow Muslims and Arabs, but it was just chaos in the streets. Now, living in Nice, I felt more or less safe It wasn't the same thing that you're going to hear from Laura about life in Paris. We felt fairly comfortable. But I knew that things were a little bit different because I was used to activism on campus at U of M. We had Israel Week on campus. There was no BDS in those days. And we had these bigwig speakers who'd come and talk in University Center. I wanted to do that on campus in Nice. Whoa, this was way too much. It was okay for us to be activists in private. Nobody wanted to step out in the limelight on campus. So I could see things were a little bit different. People weren't so comfortable. And then when I decided to do my doctorate, I decided to do it in communications because I had done Near Eastern and Judaic studies, which was more political science when I was in Hebrew and at U of M. But I wanted to take a look at the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and I knew it wasn't going to go over very well if I looked at it from a political science point of view. So I decided to do my doctorate in communications, and then it was accepted at the university. And I studied the conflict from a communications perspective about public image, how both groups are portrayed in the media. It gave me an opportunity to interview different populations, and I was able to see this emerging anti-Semitism that was no longer extreme right, but getting more and more towards the extreme left. To the point where many French Jews felt that they had been betrayed by the left. The left that the Jews had so supported socialism, which is so much a part of Jewish values, all of a sudden there were peace rallies where, as you saw in some of the footage, they were screaming death to the Jews. And this is the climate. And in the 20 years I spent in Nice, I felt things slowly but surely changing. When I first went there, you did not see women in hijabs. You just did not see women with their head covered. When I left, it was everywhere. Things had changed. And you felt a certain discomfort. It wasn't like the things Laura will explain about Paris, but there were things that you just did not feel comfortable. Not only as a Jew, but as a French person. There was a suburb near Nice called L'Ariane, which was kind of like, they say, zone de non-droit, where even the police didn't like to go. They built a beautiful theater there to try to draw the general public in. And my daughter was in a dance group, and they would use this theater because it was not very expensive to rent it. So the way we felt when we went there was this feeling of insecurity because we would park, and they would have all these security guards walk us from the parking lot. Like, we would be surrounded. They would walk us from the parking lot to the theater, which was like a half a block over. And that's not what you felt in Nice in general, but I could see how this feeling could exist in some of the suburbs in Paris. And last February I was there for a wedding, and we spent one Shabbat in this neighborhood. And when we walked from our hotel to the synagogue, they had these really big guys walk on all sides of our group. So I felt things had changed. And then, 2 summers ago in Nice, there was the fireworks display for the July 14th Bastille Day that I would go to every summer and that my brother-in-law was at. And this is where we had this huge car rally. It was actually a rental truck. And there was over 84 people killed. It was terrifying. My brother-in-law had gotten back into his car after the fireworks and just locked the doors. And all of a sudden, all these people came running. He didn't know what happened until he got home and turned on the news. So we didn't leave France because of anti-Semitism. But I have to say that now that I'm here, I'm really happy we decided to move here. I know that we don't have a lot of time, so I will leave the rest for questions.
Can I say this? It's very funny. She said, I can't speak after her because my English is not as good, so maybe you should. And then it will.
What does this imply?
I don't know.
Remember, I was born here. It's different, right?
So I'm going to say something I rarely say, but when people ask me, why did you move to Winnipeg? I have one answer that I usually give, and the other answer that I do not give. The first one is the one that is the easiest to give, and it's true. It's because I fell in love with Winnipeg and with Winnipeggers. I felt that, when I first came to Winnipeg, I thought I was in Disneyland. Everybody was happy. Everybody was smiling. And when you come from France, where people are rushing you and pushing you and being rude and honking cars, so if you see somebody honking the car, it's me. Because I keep this French side of me. So when I first drove here and I felt that nobody was honking and nobody was insulting and I thought, wow, I'm in Disneyland. People are nice here. At first, I thought it was a trick. I thought people were, doing something like hidden camera or something. But after a year, because I came here in 2003 to teach at U of M, I realized it was true. It was a way to be here in Winnipeg. So I fell in love with you. That's my first thing. The second thing, it's because I arrived in 2003 in Winnipeg, and I would have to say that in 2000, after the second Intifada, and I know that we all have the same years, and there's a reason for that. Because after the year 2000, we felt that in France, there was starting to be a kind of insecurity and a feeling that I was not welcome anymore, and I had to justify myself for being a Zionist. That I had to justify Israel's behaviors even when I did not agree with it. Because, when you said earlier, Reverend, that some of us did not agree with Israel's, I was one of them. But oddly enough, I was constantly pointed out to explain what Israel was doing. And I had to say that even if I didn't agree, they had a right to defend themselves and to exist. And just because I was saying this, I was seen as a person who was constantly defending Israel, but there was no nuance in there. And I felt extremely cornered, and I didn't like it anymore. So when I came here in 2003 to teach at U of M, I arrived in the corridors, and I saw some people wearing a kippah. And my first reaction was, oh my God, they are dangerous. Like, here, what are they doing? We're on a campus, it's not a Jewish campus, what are they doing? And I realized, no, they were talking. Yeah, they were talking to fellow students. And I could hear Hebrew in the corridors. And I could see that people were feeling actually okay. So I started you know what I did? I had a Magen David that my grandmother had given me that I had never been able to wear in France because I didn't feel safe enough to wear it. So I was thinking, okay, if people are wearing kippots here, I'm going to wear my Magen David. And here I am with my Magen David. Nothing happens. Nobody points anything. Nobody tells me, oh, are you Jewish? No one. They don't even care. I don't even know if they noticed. And nobody asked me about Israel and what I thought about Israel. I loved it. I loved it. I could be a Jew without having to defend Israel anymore. So I had this great feeling. So this is the second reason why I came. Because I had to go back to France because I did not have a visa or an immigration visa. So I had to go back to France. And the year I came back was 2004. So 2004, there was a huge rise of anti-Semitic acts in France. And it was in 2005, I was there between 2004 and 2006. So I felt that my country was really being disturbed. And I started feeling angry, and I didn't know why. And I started to hate the feeling of community, things that I had to belong to. And I did not like the fact that I was being enticed to hate Muslims. I didn't want to hate Muslims because I was friends with Muslims. And I have to say one thing that is very important, and you mentioned it, and I need to mention it again. It's that the Muslim community is not anti-Semitic. But there is anti-Semitism in the radical Muslim community, in radical Islam, and I do not want to make to amalgamate because it would not be fair. And I can tell you one thing, is that my friends who were Muslim were suffering from those anti-Semitic acts, Judeophobic acts, even more than I was. So I want to say that because it wouldn't be fair if I was not mentioning it today. The other thing that I would say is when I was looking at what was happening in France, I was not able to see things that I was able to see later when I immigrated to Winnipeg. After a few years, when I had healed, because I needed to heal, when I had healed, I was able to see that France and the governments, the successive governments in France, had their share in this war of communities, the Jewish communities and the Muslim community. Because in the 1960s and 1970s, people were the Muslim communities were actually put in one place outside of Paris into terrible housings. And there was poverty, and there was illettrism, analphabetism.
People weren't learning.
People were
illiterate.
Learning, they were not educated, and they were all part. If you do this, you cannot expect good outcomes. So, in my opinion. So, I was able to reflect on that, but while I was in France, it's like I was almost taught to be the enemy or to be against another community. And I didn't want that. I wanted to have a life where I could love people. I didn't have to hate. And I'm in the media now, but I can tell you one thing, is that when I reflect on the media and the news that I was watching in France, I can tell you that one responsibility is the French media. So when people say that the medias are held by the Jews, I can tell you one thing, there's one country in the world where the Jews do not hold the media, is France. Because when you look at the conflict of the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, it's being portrayed as David and Goliath. It's being portrayed as the good and the bad, the good and the evil. And little by little, even people who don't know lots about Israel, have this clear idea that the Jews are doing the exact same thing as the Nazis did to the Jews in the 40s. Guess what? It's very convenient. Because when you feel that your victims became the people who are actually now perpetrating horrors, then you don't feel as guilty anymore. So I have to say that the anti-Semitism that I felt underlying was the one where it was becoming convenient to say that, the Israelis, or finally, the Jews, they're not better than us. They're doing the same thing to the Palestinians. It was way, way too convenient. So this was something that was very disturbing for me. The French media, I'll give you one example, and I'm pretty sure that you saw it over the world. Are you familiar to the Tuvia Grossman case? Tuvia Grossman? So
it's that picture where the guy's all covered in blood and the policeman's behind him with the baton.
So this was the first page of Libération. Libération is probably one of the most famous newspaper or respected newspaper in France. So we see a man, a student, a young man, covered in blood, and an Israeli police officer with with matraque.
A baton.
A baton. And caption was that a student, a Palestinian student, had been beaten by an Israeli policeman.
He said it was on the Temple Mount,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
it couldn't be because there was a past gas
Yeah.
station sign right behind him, right? It was
Car,
impossible.
parked car.
First of all. And so, oddly enough, a man recognizes his son on the picture in the United States. Tuvia Grossman was the student on the picture. It was not a Palestinian on the picture. The true story was that he had been beaten by some Palestinians that came out from a demonstration, and to scare the Palestinians that were beating on the street, the police officer came and tried to make them go away. Now the picture was really well taken, but it's a responsibility, and I'm in the media, and I publish a newspaper, and I can tell you that there is not one picture that I accept in my newspaper if I have not checked myself the origin of the picture and the caption, because this is a huge responsibility, because no matter what happens, the damage is done. You can say, the erratum and sorry, we made a mistake. It's done. The damage is done. So in 2000, I had started doing Petit Déj Point Presse. It was every Sunday with a group of 12 people. We decided to talk about the media and to talk about the news and what we had read and to study if it was true or not. And we were arguing. We never agreed, and we liked it very much. And we invited journalists to come and speak and to challenge their work. From 12 people in 2000, we ended up being over 50 people in 2003 when I left. So that is to say that people really needed to feel and to talk about disinformation and misinformation in France. And I'm saying this about the media, and I shouldn't be, probably because now I belong to the media, but there is this huge responsibility, and in France, I felt that they were contributing to the problem, and that was very disturbing.
It's interesting, okay, if I can stop you for a second, because this was the theme of my thesis, was how the media was contributing to the problem. They started to realize this at one point, and they started to double check. Later I'll give you a little story about an incident when Benjamin Netanyahu came to Nice. But they were double checking and triple checking to make sure they had it right, because they were really, because people like your group were calling them on this type of thing.
This is one of the most important things, and it's to call people on it and not just let it go. So in 2006, so that was just before I left. I left on November 2006, November 2nd, 2006. About at the beginning of the year 2006, there's this young man, Ilan Halimi, who was captured by some delinquents.
Gang des Barbares.
Le Gang des Barbares, and they tortured him for 24 days, and he died.
Ilan Halimi.
Ilan Halimi.
There is a film on Netflix, I can't remember the name.
Yeah.
He was a telephone salesman.
No,
Yeah,
it's about
so
Ilan
he was basically captured for 24 days and tortured. And that was the first time where in France I actually felt physically sick and physically scared to be a Jew. That same year, in 2006, my cousin is a pilot for Tzal, and there's the war of Lebanon. And he dies because his helicopter is being hit by the Hezbollah. And I'm not trying to say he was a hero. I'm trying to say that it was difficult because he was my cousin, and we were very close. So his name is Danny Gomez, and I wanted to feel my grief. I didn't want any comment on his death. Comment I could handle was, I'm sorry, Sophie. The comments I had from my childhood friends was, you know what, in the end, Sophie, he kind of deserved it because, Israel is so, So, and so what? They are so what? And can you just understand that I want to have my grief the way you would have yours if you were to lose someone? I don't need a judgment about Israel today. Today, I don't want to be a Jew. I want to be a cousin in grief. He died on August the 12th, and I moved to Winnipeg on November 2nd.
Yes, sorry because I don't speak English very well, so I have a really French accent.
I love it.
So yeah, so you will help me for the translation. Okay. So
I used her
so we decided to move with my husband like I think 5 years ago, and it's the first time I'm saying that. We didn't choose Canada, but we escaped from France. So we didn't choose to be in Winnipeg because we love Winnipeg, like Sophie. Because when I arrived in Winnipeg with my permanent visa, I never went.
I
had never been in Canada.
An exploratory visit
No,
in the middle of winter.
yeah, no. And like 6 years ago, I remember a conversation with my husband and my parents and my family. It was at the table, and he said, "You know what? We are not safe anymore in France, especially when we are Jewish." My father said to him, "No, we are safe. We can stay here. We are still here. It's okay." He said, "No, we are not safe. We have to move." And I remember my mom cried and said, "Don't leave me, Laura. Please stay here, etc." And we decided to move. And after, there is some attack, with the kosher, in Marseille, in Paris, and a lot of, attack. And my dad called me and said, "You know what? You were right. We are not safe anymore." It was very complicated to me. Sorry, I will cry. At the beginning, because I don't have my family. I didn't speak English very well. We had good jobs, and I had to go back to school to be a French teacher and to take some French courses, And yeah, it's a joke, I know that. But I'm very happy because I'm a French teacher here, and I have a daughter, and we decided to found a family here because we are safe. And when we were in Paris, my husband told me, "I don't want to have a family in Paris, Laura. We are not safe. And I don't want to have children in Paris." So, yeah, my husband had a very good job, in Paris, here, because it's very complicated when you don't have a Canadian degree to have a good job. He has a good job, but it's not the same, so it was very complicated at the beginning because we don't have the same culture, and I didn't speak English, but now it's good. I have a daughter, she's 2 years old, and soon probably she will go to the ready, at the daycare. And you know what? It's very fun because this morning I called my mom and I said, "You know what, Mom? I'm very happy. I went to the ready, for the daycare. And I think maybe Diane will have a spot soon because she's just like 11 on the list." And the first reaction of my mom said to me, "Are you really sure, Laura? Are you really sure it's safe for your daughter? Are you really sure you want to put Diane in a Jewish daycare? If there is an attack, are you not afraid?" It was her first reaction. When I went in Winnipeg, honestly, I was a little bit shy to say I'm Jewish. It's like I was ashamed, I didn't want to say I'm Jewish because I was not comfortable. Now it's better because, like Sophie, I think here people are I'm not anti-Semitic like it can be sometimes in France, in Paris. And I was very surprised because one day during Shabbat, I saw like Chabad to have a kippot, in the streets, and I said to my husband, "Oh, they are working with their kippot. It's not possible in Paris. Very religious Jews have to wear a hat to how do you say cacher? To hide they are Jewish. So, and it's a reality. A lot of Jewish community go to Israel, and so I'm very happy because I have my daughter here. I know she's safe. She's Canadian, and she can have a kippah, in the street if she wants to be very religious. So, so thank you just to accept us in the country. So thank you for that, and thank you to people of Winnipeg who are Muslim, Christian, or Jews, and to nous faire sentir en sécurité.
To make us feel safe.
So.
You might be interested to know that about a year and a half ago, the Jewish Federation, we put an ad in one of the big French Jewish newspapers, L'Actualité Juive. We did a full-page ad, and Mel Lazarek actually went there. It turns out that when they were going, it was just after Charlie Hebdo. They couldn't change their flights. They went. They actually met with some people from the Jewish community there. And then I met with this family. We hosted them for Shabbat, and when I was in Paris in February, we saw them again. And this one family has decided to move here, and there was a bunch of families. So as a Jewish community, we've been reaching out. It's interesting because we've had phone conversations with some of the community leaders, and a lot of them were inviting us to come and visit them there because they still don't feel like it's time to go. Individuals might feel that, but as a community, and when you experience life in that community, it's so vibrant and dynamic that it's a huge tragedy. And it's not like the French government isn't aware and doing things to fight the anti-Semitism. Where I lived in Nice, local government paid to send every single grade 9 student to visit Auschwitz. That meant they went by plane. They prepared for months. They went with chaperones. Elie Wiesel's sister went with my husband on a trip. Both of them were chaperoning it. And this was a special program paid for by local government to educate Jewish, Christian, Muslim kids. Because a lot of times they, this misinformation and poor education that comes out, they think that the Holocaust was invented by the government was doing all these things to try to fix all of that misinformation. But unfortunately, you can only do so much. And that's, the kind of stuff that you were experiencing is much more intense than what I had happen in Nice.
Yeah, no, in Paris it's very complicated. And honestly, it's just my opinion. We don't feel like the government support us. Like, I think it's like they want maybe to cacher ça, to hide that, and it's a very, very big problem, and it's like the history repeat again. Like my how do you say, great grandma escaped from Romania with the Nazi, Elle a marché jusqu'en France. She walked to France to escape, and like 50 years after, I have to escape from France. So it's a reality, honestly.
I think also the French government, part of the problem is that they also feel that there's this like tidal wave coming at them, because it's a lot of hatred is also directed at the French, because the Maghreb, the North Africa was French colonies, and there's a lot of hatred towards the French, and this feeling that we were downtrodden. Like they can't seem to get out of this mentality that they're victims, that they've suffered, so that they can't make anything of themselves. And they have. Please don't misunderstand.
No, I'm just saying.
But they have, like you were saying, living in those
absolutely.
towers.
Yes.
Well, who's they? Are you saying they?
North African Muslims.
The Arab population, there's a lot of people who've really succeeded, and they've done a lot with their lives. But there's also this feeling like when a lot of the immigrants came from North Africa, the idea was that the fathers would come, they'd help rebuild France, then they'd go back. Like the French never had a plan to actually settle these people, and so that animosity towards the French, never having integrated them properly, is part of the problem. So they have animosity towards the French, and then the Jews, it's even more exaggerated than how they feel about the French. But the French themselves are having a hard time dealing with it.
Well, I think that it's true that they have been disenfranchised. Sophie was saying the same thing. That's
It
fact.
is true.
They've been stuck in these terrible suburbs.
Yes.
And the
Not
towers,
these towers,
that they're
exactly.
starting to
And
change.
have never been allowed or never been able to integrate into them. And I think that is the problem of this whole thing that we're talking about tonight.
And the origins do not justify what's happening right. Should not
Mhm.
justify, because it's not acceptable. And when I said that, I find it as unacceptable to put people and to cast them away,
Yeah.
to use them when you need them, and then cast them away when you don't need them.
That was colonial.
Yeah. And I wouldn't say that the first people were feeling animosity, but there was some kind of resentment at first. And then the second generation, because oddly enough, the third generation that immigrated from North Africa to France was not so much the generation that were feeling animosity. They probably felt a little bit of resentment.
But
And
they were very discreet people, first of all, right?
And I can understand the resentment, right? Like
Yeah,
you're
it's
being
the
used,
kids.
and then
But it's the third generation already that's not,
Right,
hasn't
exactly.
been after 3 generations.
it's this
hasn't been.
kind of unfair treatment that had been, and the origins are multiple. The origins of anti-Semitism in France today are multiple, and racism as well, because and I shouldn't say that it doesn't, it shouldn't justify anti-Semitism, full stop.
No, but I think that is the major
Yeah.
issue,
Yeah.
the disenfranchised Arab community.
Yeah.
And I think a bigger picture has to be, certainly with what was said earlier in the evening, has to be painted of French society. First of all, the army. I mean, the army is put in front of every Jewish institution. That is, the Republic of France put an army contingent in front of every single French Jewish institution to protect its French. And after every racist or terrible anti-Semitic act, and the rallies that the Reverend talked about, there is a larger group of French population that protests against them.
Mhm.
So there's, I think, a bigger picture. Has
Oh,
to be
there's a
portrayed.
huge-
There's certainly
Absolutely.
anti-Semitism in France. I lived in France for many years. I am Jewish. I have a recognizably Jewish last name, and in 10 years of living there, I did not experience one ounce of anti-Semitism ever. And I worked at Libération newspaper alongside many.
What year?
I can't say what things are like now. I can't speak to that at all. But I do know that the French government.
I think Peter said that. He did say that there is a lot of security, and it doesn't. The government tries, but not successfully, because it's coming from
It's coming from
the
his
grassroots.
Yeah,
I think
this
so.
disenfranchised. But
Yeah,
And they don't want to stigmatize either.
Yeah.
and I think that was the
And I
case
think
also
yeah.
during the French soldier.
Dreyfus.
Dreyfus.
Oh, Dreyfus,
During
yeah.
the Dreyfus affair, it was the same thing. The equality was there, but the hatred
Well,
came from
the
the people and the media, right? So
Neighbor
for that.
Canada this year reported more anti-Semitic acts in Canada than they've ever recorded in their history, and however, we're 35% greater than last year. So there is a fact.
Oh,
that
absolutely,
anti-Semitism
but we're
is
talking
everywhere.
about the French Jews and the reasons that so many of them are choosing to live. Some of them are, most of them are leaving to Israel. There's so many French Jews that bought houses and apartments in Israel with the hope that if they need it, they'll be able to go there. And there is a reason for that. Jews are not leaving Canada yet because
But they're not leaving France as much this year as they did in the past years, but that's another reason.
That's
The
good.
bigger picture
That's
has
good.
to,
Let's hope
No,
that
it's a
it's
good
going to
thing that you
stabilize,
mentioned that.
right?
yeah, and a
Like
bigger picture has to be portrayed because
yeah.
I think the French government is doing very much to protect its Jews. And after Charlie Hebdo, when Benjamin Netanyahu came to France, and he went to visit a synagogue and he started trying to get everyone to sing Hatikva, and they all sort of burst out into the Marseillaise, and he sort of thrown
There's
back.
no question,
Yeah.
and nobody is disputing it here.
But I'm just
Thank
saying
you.
that's
No,
the
thank
issue.
you. Yeah. But we want to take some questions here. Yes.
I don't know who to address this to, but why have the North African Jews done much better than the North African Muslims? I mean, the Jews of Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Libya.
There's a lot of very modest families amongst the North African Jews too. You know, Ilan Halimi, they kidnapped him for a ransom that his family could never have paid. His parents were separated. I think they wanted 400,000 euros at the time. This was a modest family. When you go and visit some of these neighborhoods, people are in such extreme situations because they're forced to live in these poor neighborhoods. They can't just get up and go. Like when we interviewed people from the French leadership to see how we could help as a community, they said we need money to help move people into safer neighborhoods. So it's not that they've done so much better. I think maybe it's just a mindset as a people. It seems to be this Jewish resilience. We kind of look forward and we try to move forward, but they've been in a situation where they maybe don't have that same mindset as trying to get out of that.
I would just I just want to add up that the first reason to me is language. Language. That's the first. If you're asking somebody to immigrate to a country and they don't speak the language, like of course they're not going to do as well.
Yeah.
Like hello.
Yeah.
Who do you need to? You don't need to be.
Well, that's true because the Jews in North Africa, a lot of them did speak French already.
Well, all of them spoke French. I
Yeah.
mean, they were. My family, my mom, was born in Algeria. My grandmother was born in Algeria. My great-grandmother was born in Algeria. And they all spoke French. Well, you come back to France, you have the language, you're recognized. So how well do you do? Well, you do a lot better than the other ones who speak Arabic. It's not a matter of religion, it's a matter of language, first thing.
Okay. Yes.
I just wanted to say that my family who made Aliyah to Israel from Marseille, after 10 years in Israel, the two daughters one was in the army and whatever, but they went back to Marseille with the son. They didn't want it to go to the army. So, it's not so.
It's not so easy to make Aliyah. There's a lot of, like, in my own family, because we have a lot of families still in Paris and Nice, they have good jobs, they're educated in France, they don't feel an imminent threat, like on a daily basis, so they're staying there because they can earn a decent living. It's not so easy in Israel to, a lot of Israelis are leaving because of the economic situation, so not everybody can stay. Even that's their ideology and their dream, it doesn't always work out. And I keep saying to my sister-in-law, why don't the kids move to Israel? My niece and nephew, they just got married, they haven't had kids yet. No, they're comfortable here, yet it's sort of lurking. Go figure.
What other factors other than possibly immigrant economics are leading the North African communities to settle in these difficult communities?
Sorry, what did you say?
What factors other than possibly immigrant economics, as in people cannot afford anything more, is leading the immigrants to live in these what apparently are difficult communities?
You mean the Jewish?
No, the Muslim. The Muslim community.
Are there influences that are driving them there? That they
I'm going to be
prefer not
completely
to?
honest. If you're being asked if you want to stay in your house in the North End, or if you want to stay in a house in River Heights instead, I'm pretty sure there would not be many people who would say, "Oh no, I want to stay in my house in the North End, where there are gangs and."
You're asking the wrong guy.
I'm a proud boy.
I'm going to drop
And you're right. You're right.
Sometimes people won't rent to them, Sophie. That's the honest truth.
That's
Sometimes
another point.
that, and that's like
I
not written
don't
somewhere.
believe it's a choice. My short answer, and you're right. I don't know the North End very well, but the idea is that it's not a choice. I cannot believe it's a choice.
So
It's
then
a-
it's largely an economic situation.
Cultural too. You want to stay where your community is. It's true.
And
Yeah.
if some homeowners are being asked if they can rent to those Muslims, they more than often there will be a no answer. When a Muslim comes with their name and they ask to rent your property, they will say no.
Not outright, obviously, but
No, not outright, but I mean,
Subtle discrimination.
yeah, it's not so subtle sometimes.
Social.
Yeah. No, it's true. We have
so.
to
But what's so ironic? What I find is so ironic is that movement, SOS Racisme. Here we have these Jewish people who were there trying to help uplift their Arab counterparts. And that was something that was so hopeful and positive, and I don't understand how that got turned around and turned against them.
Not by all of them.
No, not by all of them. But I just sort of, I feel that's a shame. It's
Sure.
Sure.
We have one here, and then you, and then we'll
Thank you. So first, I'd like to say thank you for coming to Canada. You have made this country richer by being part. And for you, you've made Aaliyah back to Canada.
I love Winnipeg.
So thank you.
I love it.
My question is to some extent, you've all gone through the educational system here in Canada. Maybe that's an assumption, but University of Winnipeg, University of Manitoba. Some might be even still connected. I don't know that, but if you are,
I do online teaching with you
okay.
them.
So are you seeing anti-Semitism in Winnipeg in the university level, or can you speak to that?
Well, I was asked to monitor a radio, I don't know how you would call it. They had this 24-hour radio thing from U of W during what they called Al-Nakba week. So Al-Nakba that's what the Palestinians call Yom HaAtzmaut.
Catastrophe.
Yeah, the catastrophe, because it didn't work out quite how they had hoped. So I listened to several hours so I could report back, and it was rather frightening. It was rather frightening, and it was not just that it was anti-Israel, but it was overtly anti-Semitic and anti-Jewish. And it was right there on the air for everybody who would take the time to tune in to listen to. And this was just like 2 years ago. So I found that really really disappointing because my experience as a student at U of M was Israel Week. And we had decent relationships with Muslim students. I think that's changed a lot because of BDS.
I heard they recently shut down a show in the last week or two that was very anti-Semitic at University of Winnipeg as well. They took it off the air.
And I'm not on campus anymore. But,
Okay.
and like I said, the teaching I do is online, so I don't really see that.
Sophie, your comments on the media and or keeping the media honest ring home with me. I'm reminded of Mark Twain's quote, "Those who don't read the newspapers are uninformed. Those who read the newspapers are misinformed."
Well, I would answer that I have not read my newspaper.
I have one last question to all of you, and I know Laura spoke to me about it, so maybe you can answer it. How can we make it more welcoming to French Jews who wish to immigrate here? Because you articulated there are some issues with language, for example, and so forth. Do you want to answer that?
What is he?
That's a good question.
Well, from my perspective is seeing how my family integrated, because my husband is Moroccan but grew up in Morocco and France. My kids, half their schooling there, half their schooling here. I think we spend a lot of time concentrating on the Spanish-speaking newcomers, the Israeli newcomers, the Russian newcomers, not very much with the French newcomers. We actually do have a lot of French-speaking people in the Jewish community. So it's just nice to kind of make that awareness and think of including them. And now you know these guys. So.
I think it would be good to have, because when I came in Winnipeg, I contacted the Jewish Federation. I didn't speak English very well, and I don't remember who, but a woman told me, oh, there is a French lady. She went to France with her husband. He's French. You will contact her. It's Rena. And I contacted Rena 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And after it was better for us, because she speaks French, so it was better to me and to my husband to have a conversation in French. But I think if the Jewish Federation would have, I don't know,
French group,
and just to introduce new French Jewish,
like a support group.
Yeah.
Because there are new families that come, we don't always find out about it if they don't come through Federation. Like if they come through Federation, they always connect them. But otherwise, we don't know.
I had probably one of the best experiences. And every single of you tonight could make a difference for people who come in. This is, when I first came to Winnipeg, I went with a friend of mine who told me, you know what, I live at a lady's house, and she is the most fantastic woman in Winnipeg that you can meet, and she's Jewish. So she took me to Temple Shalom, and the president of Temple Shalom at that time was Ruth Livingston, and you may know her. She's the one who welcomed me. I met friends. I met Matthew's mom, who invited me for Pesach. I met a French lady who told me she was married to a Jewish man, and he invited me for Yom Kippur. I don't remember which one. And Stephen Brodowski, and on and on and on. And in the end, I met one person and then another one. And we don't have our families here to celebrate Pesach, to celebrate Yom Kippur, and when you find this one family that you feel connection with, you feel that you have a new family again, and I miss my family, of course, but I don't miss a family life, because I found a family life here. Our kids. Sorry. called with Baba. She's a real Baba to them. There is no question there. How many grandparents do you have, Samuel and Charlie? Oh, I have 6. Oh, really? Maybe. Really? Yeah. I have Baba, and the kids and we as a family feel extremely lucky. And this is how you can make the difference.
I think also holding an event like this, for me it means a lot. Because when that happened with the attack on the Hyper Cacher and Charlie Hebdo, I kind of felt a little bit alone. So to know that the community cares enough to make this kind of an evening, that's really awesome. Thank you.
The panelists, Laura, Rena, and Sophie. I know them all, just the names don't come. And of course, Peter for delivering such a good speech about in such short notice. Too, so I'm very impressed. Thank you. Let's hope that really no, I can't speak, but let's hope that it's going to plateau the hate of Jews and hate of anyone in France or anywhere in the world. But if Jews want to come here, we also can extend our welcome to them and help them to feel like they have a community here as well. So thank you for coming. And don't forget, April 23rd, the son of Hamas is going to be here, and we want all of you to attend.